Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So we're beginning today, or continuing today, the topic on tasawwuf, Sufism or Islamic spirituality. And till the end of the course, this is what we will be discussing. The last few articles that you have are Islamic psychology and spirituality. So sort of the overlap between psychology and the spiritual. So keeping that in mind, what are the questions that you have right now with regards to Sufism? So what you knew about it before and what we did in the last class, in the last session. Do you have any questions or any comments about what you understand Islamic spirituality to be? Because there are a lot of things that, it refers to. So for example, I remember asking you in the beginning of the course, is my writing pad is not connected, isn't it? So from the last session, what do you understand about it? Can you hear me clearly? Can you please type or let me know by unmuting your mic?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so it's purification of the heart. And there were some good questions asked at the end of the session, which not everybody attended. But how do you think the tasawwuf is viewed as within our society? So within the Pakistani society, what is your understanding of the tasawwuf? Have you heard of the name before? Have you heard of the word muraqaba? Have you ever heard this term anywhere? No one? Okay, so muraqaba comes from the word raqib. It's an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means the ever watchful. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us carefully. Okay? So ever watchful, you can explain it as a being who watches intensely without I don't know if that's a good example, but just before some one of the animals, if they're going to strike as at a prey, they're not moving around at all, right? So they're very silent and they're very watchful. That's one way to explain this word, but essentially what it means is that not heedless, right? Attentive. So this understanding about God, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the universe. There is one belief in which you believe that God is a creator, but you don't believe that he takes care of his creation. So he created something and now he's a distant Lord. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and when we study his attributes, he's not a distant Lord. So not distant, right? So muraqabah is actually a two-way street. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so attentive to our needs, the idea in tasawwuf is that muraqabah, whenever a disciple or a student is taught muraqabah by the teacher, the idea is that it's a type of zikr, it's a type of remembrance of Allah in which you are not heedless and you're extremely attentive. Now, of course, a person can argue that namaz or salah, right, that itself is meant to be prayed like that. You're supposed to pray salah in a way that you're not heedless, attentive, and not distant, right? Um, and a person can just practice praying their salah in such a manner, right? So this is one of the criticisms you can say. If you study this term in tasawwuf, you will see the benefits of it, right? But it's something nafil. It's something that theoretically also they understand to be not obligatory. It's just something nafil, right? It's something that you can undertake so that you attain this ever watchful nature. So like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is attentive to our needs, we need to be attentive to his being there, right? Just his being there and his attributes. So the criticism is that salah or prayer needs to be the same way, and we don't really have to go into this particular nafal ibadah, which is because it is nafal, it's not sunnah, right? So you don't get it from the hadith, you're not actually getting it from any of the hadith. It wasn't practiced like that in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not even in the time of the Sahaba or the Tabi'een. But over time, it developed, and there is also criticism that it came about from the Hindu tradition. So there are some of them, right? So some of the silsilas that I mentioned this. So just like there are four schools of thought in fiqh, similarly in tasawwuf there is a silsila, which simply means a chain. So again, a teacher from the teacher is learning from his teacher, all the way to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And a lot of times these silsilas either come from Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu or Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu. Okay? So these were, you can say, expert Sahabis at the science of the heart. So they were well versed with the science of the purification of the soul. TK, so silsila means what? A chain that comes down to us from the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Again, there are four very famous ones. So has anyone heard of them? Qadiriya, Chishti, Suhrawardi, and I think I'm missing a fourth one. I don't remember it right now. Does anyone know? Has anyone heard of these tasawwuf silsilas? Chishti, Suhrawardi, Qadiri, and there's a fourth one I'm missing. I think Naqshbandi. So again, we're looking at the Sunni tasawwuf history, and there must be others as well. So for example, now let me show you a slide that is talking about what the Salafis would say, right? Remember we talked about the Salafis being a fifth madhab. So they're still Sunnis, but their basically Aqidah is also different, right? There's some things in the Aqidah, not everything, but something in the Aqidah that are different. The Shi'i tasawwuf is again separate. Okay, so Rizwiya, can you also let me know? Actually, I'm not also very well aware. We don't have a reading on this, by the way, so this is just extra notes that you have to make, a background to what you are doing. Okay, so let me know of Rizwiya, which anything that you know about it. Can you share it with me, please? I would want to know more. So according to my knowledge, these four are there. I would like to know more as well. All right. So what did Imam Ghazali say about his going for 10 years, leaving all his responsibilities and his job? Remember that he left his job, right? So he's leaving his family behind, he's leaving his job. That is, if you consider today's scenario, that's not really responsible. We wouldn't really call that responsible, would we? But he's going for 10 years for something that he feels is crucial to his salvation. So because it's a matter of his own salvation in the hereafter, he undertook this path. And then after 10 years, he resumed teaching. He took a decade and then he resumed teaching. All right, that's when he wrote his favorite book, Revival of the Religious Sciences, Ihya Ulumuddin, Revival of the Religious Sciences. He wrote it after he came back from his retreat. Now, what is interesting, your first chapter number 10 from the Book of Assistance. What does it mean? Book of Assistance means your assistance on the path of the tasawwuf, right? So it helps you on the path of the tasawwuf. That's what it means. It's by Imam al-Haddad. And your first reading from that is chapter number 10 on following the book and sunnah. Ji, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me? Can you also let me know what was the last thing you heard when I got disconnected?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, you were telling about Imam Ghazali, how he wrote his book.
All right, so he went for 10 years and he resumed his teaching at the end of it, right? So he felt that this was his salvation. And for his salvation, he needed to do this for his own hereafter. So he resumed teaching and everything else when he came back. And that's when he wrote his Ihya Ulumuddin, his Revival of the Religious Sciences. And that's why it's a very, very famous book. It's volumes of books on, the do's and the don'ts of religion, coupled by the spiritual truth behind them. So it's not just a fiqh book. You can't just call it a fiqh book, but it has this inner dimension to it, which is because of the 10 years that he spent in retreat, right? Acha. So for example, if he's talking about fasting, he's going to go on in depth about, what are the spiritual benefits of fasting and what can you do to make your fasting such that it spiritually benefits you, because there is a hadith by the Prophet ﷺ that if you use foul language, right, it's as if I'm paraphrasing, but if you're not careful about your, the sins that one is committing, then all you're doing in fasting is staying away from food and drink. So it's just like keeping yourself hungry, but not really spiritually benefiting, right? So this is part and parcel of deen, right? You cannot divorce the inner dimension of the do's and the don'ts of the prayer and the fasting and the hajj whenever we talk about religion and deen. If we do that, we present a skewed understanding. And I think everybody understands that. So if you see a Maulvi who is driving on the road and he sort of overtakes you in the wrong manner, agar kisi aur ka hak maar raha hai, right? Everybody knows that's wrong and they feel more outraged because they're saying that apparently he's acting to be religious, but then doesn't he know that there is an inner dimension as well, right? You have to be honest, you have to be truthful, you have to go according to law. So like even following traffic laws is actually being religious, because Deen tells us that you have to follow the ulul amr, and that includes, the society, the rules and the laws of society, because if you don't, then it may harm others. Okay? So even at 12 o'clock, if there's no one else on the roads and you feel that you can cross the red light, you may be mistaken and that may cause an accident, right? So following rules which us Pakistanis are so bad at not following, until we go abroad and then we follow the same old rules just because I think we're more concerned about how they view us, as opposed to, again, being aware of Allah watching us and being on our best behavior because we want to do it for God. So that is a big issue with us, right? That's why someone said that Muslims have the best religion, but they have the worst followers. That's one understanding. That's one way to look at it. But also, if someone, I think Faisal is well versed with good poetry. So if you can maybe share some Iqbal verses with us at the end of the class, referring to this, right? Yes, is also Shadili, right? You're right. So yes, my TA has reminded me of the Shadili silsila, and I'm wondering that makes 5. So again, my own knowledge of this, I have not revised it. Um, so since we don't really have a reading or a book on this, this is one of the silsilas, Shadili, and I'm not sure how it's usually mentioned that there are 4. So maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe one of them is not considered to be one of the main ones, perhaps, and maybe it died out or something. Maybe not really sure, but I'm sure I've heard of. Chale, I'll confirm that for you if there are 4 main ones, or if there are 5, or if I'm mistaken, and then one of them perhaps maybe died out or became less famous. Not really sure about that. All right. So again, it's the inner dimension. When we're talking about the sabbath, we're talking about the inner dimension of deen, which is, as you can see, really important. And I was telling you when I got disconnected that your first reading, apart from the Imam Ghazali one, right? It's the Imam Ghazali one is giving you a story of this famous, really intelligent, famous, well-known faqih scholar, right? Who was well versed in logic and rhetoric, and he could very well, win an argument whenever he decided to partake of it. He went on this journey of self-discovery and purification of the heart, right? And then he came back and resumed his worldly activities. So, iske baad aapki hai Sufism and Sharia. So whenever we're talking about Sufism, we also need to look at the Sharia. We're not forgetting the Quran and the Hadith, right? Sufism is not something beyond the Quran and Hadith. It's not telling you or teaching you, or should not at least take you towards something that is not in the Quran and the Sunnah, right? So your very first reading is Sufism and Sharia, because what is Sharia? Sharia is essentially, the crux of the Quran and the Sunnah, what you're getting, right? The law that you're getting out of the Quran and Sunnah. So your first reading is from Sufism and Sharia. And what page number is it? Just after your Ghazali reading. And interestingly, Sufism and Sharia, this is on page 297 of your package. The handwritten page number is 297, a study of Sheikh Ahmad Sahindi's effort to reform Sufism, or you can say revive Sufism. So again, you can see that a lot of practices came about in Sufism that he felt shouldn't have been there. So he wrote this book, Sufism and Sharia, that of course it has to be conformative to the Sharia. You can't go beyond the Sharia. Sufism is not teaching you anything beyond what the Sharia is teaching you. It's just telling you to focus on what is really important, right? Because if you take that out, then you will have a skewed understanding of religion. So, and I remember, because I became interested in Sufism around your age, and I found this book, Sufism and Sharia, in the Lum's library. I just happened to come upon it, and it really interested me because that's how I wanted to look at it. I wanted to see it in the eyes of the Sharia, right? So He says on page number 2. Okay, if you can open page 300 of your package. The object of Sufi tariqa is nothing. Tariqa means what? Urdu wala tariqa nahi hai ye. It means, again, the way to go, or a street, or a pathway, right? So the Sufi pathway is nothing but to produce conviction in the beliefs of the Sharia. So what is it? It's actually just an effort to bring you to yaqeen in the beliefs of the Sharia and to facilitate the observance of its rules and to make you a better Muslim, to make you a person who is better at following the Sharia. After one has acquired right beliefs and subjected oneself to the rules of the Sharia, one should, if God so wills, enter the path of the Sufis, but one should not pursue it in order to get something over and above the beliefs and the practices of the Shara. Shar here means not shar, not sheen ra. It means shara. There's an ayn at the end, which is basically the masculine form of Sharia, sorry, yeah, or acquire something new. The purpose of following the Sufi ways to gain a conviction in the objects of faith that cannot be weakened by the doubts of a skeptic or shaken by the remarks of an objector. So then the idea is that your belief is not just based on some proofs, it's not just based on something rhetorical or some logical critical reasoning. There's a part of it in it, but essentially your faith or your belief is in your heart or in your soul, right? And it cannot be shaken by anybody else's remarks. That is the purpose. So the conviction or the yaqeen, which is founded on arguments, is not firm, and one who pursues reasoning does not get certitude. Know that it is through the remembrance of God that one gets the peace and satisfaction of the heart. So this is again an ayah, a verse that he is quoting. Allah bi dhikrillahi tatma'innal qulub, that know only and only, actually Allah jo hai na yahan pe, in the Arabic, Allah bi dhikrillahi tatma'innal qulub, that it is only and only in the remembrance. Or you can also say, if you translate it more literally, is it not? And Allah is actually pointing out, it's a rhetorical question that of course it is, right? Is it not? Allah bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. It is definitely through the remembrance of Allah that hearts find peace and satisfaction. Right? So everybody wants peace and satisfaction in this world. Allah is telling us in the Quran that it is His remembrance, or unki yaad hai, right? Allah ki yaad, that brings a heart satisfaction and peace. So the author, Sheikh Ahmad Sarhandi, is saying this is the object of the Sufi tariqa regarding belief. ठीक है, अला बिदिक्रिल्लाहि तत्मइन्नुल कुलूब, कि क्या नहीं अल्लाह के जिक्र से दिलों को सुकून मिलता है, बल्कि इत्मीनान, तत्मइन्ना is actually the same word as इत्मीनान in उर्दू, तत्मइन्नुल कुलूब, ठीक है। तो इत्मीनान किस चीज़ से मिलता है? दिल को। और यहाँ पे अगेन रूहानी दिल की बात हो रही है, अल्लाह की याद से, ठीक है। सो क्योंकि रिटोरिकल क्वेश्चन है, इट मीन्स कि अल्लाह ताला ये सवाल क्यों कर रहे हैं, कि इसका आंसर बहुत ऑब्वियस है। अल्लाह ताला is saying कि सिर्फ अल्लाह की याद से ही इंसान को के दिल को सुकून मिलता है, इत्मीनान मिलता है। दिस इज द ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ द सूफी तरीका रिगार्डिंग बिलीफ। तो सूफी तरीका क्या कह रहा है, यानी द सूफी pathway is aiming at making us people who remember Allah, ठीक है। तो अल्लाह ताला की याद इंसान को आसान हो जाए, यानी अल्लाह ताला की याद should be our everyday, every second thing, right? So we shouldn't live our lives, heedless of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or forgetful of Him. Instead, we should be people who are when you hearken to the call of the Quran, yani when you are, क्योंकि कुरान एक्चुअली क्या है, हमारी फितरा की तरफ बुला रही है हमें, इट्स रिमाइंडिंग अस ऑफ आवर फितरा, ठीक है ना। तो वही याद है एक्चुअली, फितरा, इंसान की फितरत ये है कि अल्लाह की याद हमारे दिल में हो, दैट वी रिमेंबर अल्लाह, वी बिलीव इन हिम, वी हैव यकीन। सो सूफी सलूक जो है वो हमें इसी की तरफ लेके जा रहा है। तो इसके क्या तरीके हो सकते हैं, ठीक है, स्किल्स क्या हो सकती हैं. रिमेंबर वी टॉक्ड अबाउट चेंज ऑफ हैबिट, यू नीड स्किल्स. समटाइम्स यू हैव द नॉलेज. हम सबको पता तो है कि इनर डायमेंशन ज़रूरी है हर चीज़ की. अगर आप सिर्फ बाहर से कुछ कर रहे हैं, किसी के लिए भी दिल से नहीं कर रहे, तो यू आर नॉट डूइंग इट इन एन एक्सेलेंट मैनर. ठीक है, जब दिल से इंसान कोई चीज़ करता है तो उसमें खूबसूरती भी पैदा होती है. एंड अ पर्सन कैन टेल इफ समबडी इज डूइंग समथिंग हाफ हार्टेडली. तो उसके लिए इंसान को स्किल चाहिए. ठीक है, वो स्किल सेट चाहिए. तो सूफीज़म, अगर इफ़ यू फाइंड अ गुड, you know, tasawwuf sheikh, a good person who knows the science of the heart or the soul, तो वो आपको ये skill set दे सकेंगे. They can teach you about it. They can tell you how to go about. So one simple example, ठीक है. अब ये देखें, एक चीज़ है कि अगर आप सिलसिलों की जब हम बात करते हैं around this, I'm also going to give you a talk right now to listen to, which is you know, where does Sufism go wrong. तो कहाँ पर यानी गड़बड़ हो जाती है, ठीक है, issues with tasawwuf. तो ये स्पेशली सिलसिला से रिलेटेड हो जाता है, बिकॉज इन अ सिलसिला you have a sheikh and you have to be very careful what the relationship of the sheikh with the student is, because unfortunately it goes into a whole, you know, cult situation which is extremely un-Islamic and crazy. ठीक है, यानी कल्ट मेंटालिटी नहीं होनी चाहिए कि बस अब ये कोई सिलसिला आपको मिल गया है कि अगर आप शेख के साथ बनी कनेक्ट हो गए हैं तो पता नहीं क्या हो गया. दैट्स नॉट द पॉइंट ऑफ सैल्वेशन. बिकॉज अगर आप ये बात करें, इमाम गज़ाली की स्टोरी पढ़ें, तो होता क्या है कि जो लोग इस कल्ट मेंटालिटी में फंस चुके होते हैं, जब वो पढ़ते हैं तो कहते हैं ओ इसी इमाम गज़ाली भी तो गए थे, उनके लिए भी ज़रूरी था, उनकी आखिरत के लिए ज़रूरी था कि वो किसी सिलसिले में जाते और किसी शेख से बैठ लेते. तो वो इस नज़रिए से देखे होते हैं तो प्रॉब्लम्स क्रिएट हो जाती हैं. इसलिए इट इज़ रियली इंपॉर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इज़ राइट एंड व्हाट्स नॉट राइट. तो अगर ये कल्ट मेंटालिटी हो रही है कि ये कोई ख़ास, यू नो, क्या कहना चाहिए, एक कोई ग्रुप है जो ख़ास, यानी कोई तखसीस करती गई है कि ये ख़ास ग्रुप है कि आप इसमें अगर दाखिल हो गए, इसका कोई हिस्सा बन गए तो आपको कुछ ख़ास चीज़ मिल गई है, ये कॉन्सेप्ट गलत है. ठीक है ना, क्योंकि अगेन within that group you have to be a person who is following the Quran and the Sunnah. हो सकता है कि उसमें टीचिंग से सही सब सिखाई जा रही हो, थ्योरी बिल्कुल सही सुनाई जा रही हो आपको, लेकिन प्रैक्टिकली प्रॉब्लम्स हो, बिकॉज ऑफ कोर्स देयर सो मेनी पीपल in a group, right? If it's a huge group like hundreds and thousands of followers um, of the sheikh, there are going to be definitely people who are not following the theory. There are going to be people who are going astray. So how can you just put this out there कि अगर आप सिर्फ इस ग्रुप में ही दाखिल हो गए, बस बैत ले ली तो आपकी बात बन गई. Unfortunately this is what people teach. ये होता है, पाकिस्तान में होता है. तो बहुत सारे मसाइल हैं, तो आपने उन मसाइल के बारे में भी आगाह होना है. आपने इनको समझना है कि मसले कहाँ हो सकते हैं, और जो बेनिफिट्स हैं उनके बारे में आपने समझना है. ठीक है, तो ये स्किल सेट अगर आपको दी जा रही है, तो अब फॉर एग्जांपल आपने नमाज, आप कहते हैं कि आपकी नमाज में दिल नहीं लगता, तो एक इसकी बेटा एक इसका तरीका नमाज में दिल लगाने का ये है कि वज़ू जब इंसान शुरू करता है, ठीक है, सो फर्स्ट थिंग यू हैव टू डू फॉर नमाज इज मेक वुज़ू. So when you're going to do wuzu, you're going to remember that you're going to stand in front of Allah after this. ठीक है, यानी उसी वक्त वज़ू के दरमियान, वज़ू के दौरान ही आपने अपनी जो थॉट प्रोसेस है ना, वो दुनिया से हटाकर अल्लाह ताला की तरफ लगानी है. क्योंकि होता क्या है कि हम वज़ू कर रहे होते हैं, हम फिर भी अपना एवरीडे बात सोच रहे हैं, हम सोच रहे हैं कि नमाज के बाद मैंने क्या करना है, the whole day and everything. So because we're not used to it, we're just so used to doing everything for the दुनिया. तो एक चीज़ है कि जब वज़ू करें तो याद करें कि अभी हमें अल्लाह के सामने खड़े होना है. दूसरी चीज़ आप याद करें हदीस के, अगर एक इंसान 5 वक्त वज़ू करता है दिन में, तो गोया कि उसके सारे गुनाह माफ़ हो गए. इट्स लाइक ही इज़ लाइक बेथिंग इन अ रिवर बिसाइड हिज हाउस. ठीक है, तो उससे क्या होगा, 5 दफ़ा अगर वो ये करेगा तो उसके ऊपर तो कोई डर्ट ही नहीं रहेगी एट द एंड ऑफ द डे. ठीक है, तो वज़ू क्या करता है, वो स्पिरिचुअल सिंस हटाता है. सो व्हेन यू आर मेकिंग दैट वज़ू, व्हेन यू आर वॉशिंग योर फेस, व्हेन यू आर washing your hands, you're making this intention, and you're reminding yourself, remembering कि इससे गुनाह माफ होते हैं, ठीक है. Of course, अच्छा, when we don't really know, depth of this concept about sins getting washed away, तो फिर सवाल ये भी पैदा होता है कि क्या इसका मतलब है कि इंसान गुनाह करता रहे और अच्छे काम करता रहे, ये सोच के कि अच्छा मैंने गुनाह, चलो मैं गुनाह कर लेता हूँ, मैं वजू करूँगा तो धुल जाएंगे. नो, दैट इज नॉट द कॉन्सेप्ट. अगेन, आई होप यू रिमेंबर दिस एग्जाम्पल. इट्स अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एग्जाम्पल. आई गेव इट बिफोर कि अगर कोई इंसान एक डस्टबिन में खड़ा हुआ है, वो गार्बेज की जो स्मेल होती है, राइट, इट इज़ वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग, a huge dump of garbage, and you put on itar or perfume on yourself, that perfume is not going to take away the smell of the garbage. तो दीन में भी एग्जैक्टली ये है कि पहले इंसान ने सिन ख़त्म करना है अपना, एंड देन योर गुड डीड्स आर गोइंग टू बी ब्यूटिफुल. तो वज़ू में जो ये धुल जाते हैं, दैट इज़ एन एक्स्ट्रा, आई मीन दैट मेक्स इट ईजियर, इज़न्ट इट, फॉर अ पर्सन हु इज़, बिकॉज we're not 100% free of sin, तो हम गलतियाँ कर देते हैं. Sometimes we don't even know we're sinning and we sin. किसी का कोई बात ऐसी करती है and somebody's heart got hurt, and sometimes we don't even know it, right? Maybe we said something to a friend and we later find out कि अच्छा वो hurt हो गए थे. So that is sinful, to hurt somebody's heart. तो हम गलतियाँ करते हैं, sometimes voluntarily, कोई कर बैठते हैं, बाद में they regret it. So the idea is that the wuzu, the ablution is washing away the sins, ठीक है. तो उसका गुनाह का असर होता है दिल पर. अगर इंसान तौबा नहीं करता है, इस्तिग़फ़ार नहीं करता, then the heart gets hardened, and you know that, I mean scientifically and logically, कि जब एक इंसान बार-बार एक चीज़ करने लग जाता है and they're not feeling bad about it, they're not leaving it, they're not saying istighfar, they think it's fine, तो वो harden हो जाता है heart, because the point is that you become desensitized, it becomes normal for you, ठीक है. So you're going towards that path, right? अच्छा, are extremists and Sufi the same, or are they both? Acha, that's a good question. Usually extremists are considered who are the opposite to Sufis. ठीक है, तो क्योंकि वो extreme literal meaning ले लेते हैं एक चीज़ का, तो वो Sufism से opposite usually समझा जाता है. But I mean literal understanding of extremist means कि वो एक extreme पे चले जाते हैं, ठीक है. तो Sufi extreme भी हो सकती है. तो अगेन, अगर एक इंसान फिक ही भूल जाए, तो वही कहते हैं कि जी शेख जो है वो पता नहीं कहाँ पहुँच गए, उसने इतनी इबादत की, शैतान की तरह किसी लेवल पे पहुँच गए, इतने सालों से इबादत कर रहे थे, अब वो 60 ईयर्स के अब हो गए, तो वो बस अब दे डोंट नीड टू प्रे नमाज नाउ. दैट्स एन एक्सट्रीम understanding of Sufism. That's an extremist within Sufism. That's impossible, right? Nobody says that I mean, there's nowhere in the Quran, Hadith, in any of the corpus of the Deen, that tells you कि आप किसी ऐसे मकाम पे पहुंच सकते हैं जहाँ पे आपको अब नमाज की ज़रूरत ही ना हो, कि अल्लाह की याद तो इतनी हासिल हो गई है, अब क्योंकि पर्पस था कि जी नमाज अल्लाह की याद दिलाए, अब तो याद ऐसी आती रहती है, तो अब नमाज का क्या फ़ायदा. That's an extreme, I mean, that is an extremist, right? But yes, usually in your literature, when you read this word extremist, it's the opposite of Sufism. It's the other extreme, ठीक है. Okay. Acha, after your Sufism and Sharia reading, let us do the next paragraph as well together. जो अभी हमने पढ़ा है, page 300 पे, इसके बाद वाला paragraph. Likewise, the purpose of the Sufi suluk is not to see the forms and images of transcendental realities. अब इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि आपको कोई विजन आने लग जाएंगे, आपकी ये नीयत होनी चाहिए कि मैं इसलिए सूफीज़म में एंटर हो रहा हूँ या इस सिलसिले में दाखिल हो रहा हूँ ताकि मैं कोई ख़ास एक्सपीरियंस होगा और मुझे कुछ नज़र आएगा, यानी कि कोई रियलिटी नज़र आएगी, एंजल्स नज़र आएंगे, नज़र आना शुरू हो जाएंगे. ट्रांसेंडेंटल रियलिटी मीन्स जो मटेरियल वर्ल्ड से बाहर है, रियलिटी है लेकिन इट्स अपार्ट फ्रॉम द मटेरियल वर्ल्ड, राइट. So it's not the purpose of the Sufi suluk or to behold colors and lights. They are nothing more than play or fun. Allah Ta'ala ने दुनिया के बारे में कहा है कि ये दुनिया क्या है, एक खेल तमाशा, right? It's nothing but play and fun. So just like that, if a Sufi enters the suluk and starts doing zikr for this purpose, and all they're doing is fun, going towards something worldly again. It's just something to fulfill their own nafs. Material forms and physical lights are not less interesting if one wants to have fun. Why should one leave them and run after the spiritual forms and lights and take up austere, difficult practices for that purpose? Forms, these or others, and lights, physical or spiritual, are all created by God. He transcends them altogether. They are nothing but His signs and proofs. So again, point is कि अगर किसी को कुछ नजर आ रहा है, कोई lights and whatever, if they're doing zikr, again, it's just a sign of Allah. It's just like any other sign in this world. It's just like the sun and the moon and the day and the night. All of the signs are already present, but that's not a purpose. One should sort of bypass that and focus on what is really important, and that is the remembrance of Allah. ठीक है? Acha. So he mentions a bit about hearing songs or performing dances. Okay? Of course, in the Turkish tradition, you must have heard of the Turkish specific, the dervish dances, right? अब इसके बारे में there is actually a long video by Timothy Winter, Abdul Hakim Murad, on music in the Islamic tradition. It's a long one, and he talks very slowly. So I hope you guys can listen to it. But again, I'll keep it as recommended. So it's not a mandatory part of the course, but I will share that with you if anybody is interested. Because the way that he talks about things, it's very interesting if you sort of become used to it, I guess. Some people find it really boring and dull because um, it's a very different type of speaking. Acha. So he says in the end, the sign of the validity of an experience is first that it agrees with the doctrines of the Sharia, and second that in order to have it, one does not commit anything which is forbidden by the Sharia or which is doubtful. Okay. Okay, the important concept here is fana and baqa. Who has heard of fana and baqa? अगर आप लोगों ने मुराकबा नहीं सुना तो शायद fana baqa भी ना सुना हो, but I mean, some of you must have heard of it. What is fana and baqa? I think I already mentioned it in one of the classes before. Or maybe just to some of you. No, I think it was after class. Acha, something that is fani या बाकी. Fani और बाकी अगर आपको पता है क्या है उर्दू लैंग्वेज में, सुना मैं ये चीज
हम
fani.
फना तो होता है ना कि जो खत्म हो जाना चाहिए वक्ती तौर पे, टेम्परेरी हो, और बका होता है हमेशा रहने वाली जात या जो भी.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. और
जो बाकी रहे.
जी.
तो अच्छा, तो अगर आपको ये पता है कि फानी और बाकी क्या है, तो फना और बका का आप क्या कह सकते हैं, यानी अकॉर्डिंग टू योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग क्या होगा?
मैम, फना और बका मतलब अगर हम अपनी ज़ात के हवाले से बात करें तो लाइक हम ह्यूमंस हैं, हम लोगों ने फना होना है, ठीक है, लेकिन जो अल्लाह की जो ज़ात है डेट इज़ बका, हमेशा रहने वाली ज़ात है.
बिल्कुल ठीक है, एग्जैक्टली. ओके
जी.
अच्छा, अब अगर आप इस्लामिक यानी सूफी ट्रेडिशन में फना और बका देखें तो इट्स एक्चुअली इन दैट सिलसिला या इन दैट जर्नी, ठीक है, ऑफ doing zikr or certain practices. ठीक है, again zikr is something that is nafli. So for example, the name of Allah, the Naqshbandis say the name of Allah, ठीक है, in their hearts, not aloud. ठीक है, क्योंकि अल्लाह ताला ने कुरान, they use the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ने कुरान में कहा, remember the name of your Lord, ठीक है, wadhkur isma rabbik. So the Arabic is wadhkur isma rabbik, that remember, wadhkur dhikr से आ रहा है, the name of your Lord, isma rabbik, the name of your Lord. तो वो इस आयत को लेते हैं, and then that's how they get this zikr. ठीक है, so it's a nafli zikr. So when a person starts doing this zikr, they're saying that eventually they might reach a state of fana, ठीक है, which is basically being lost in God, yani being lost in the remembrance of Allah. And what they're saying is that the theory is कि वो इतना ज़्यादा उसमें यानी गुम जाते हैं कि दुनिया से हट जाते हैं, ठीक है. It's like they are cut off from the world and their responsibilities and they get lost in the remembrance of Allah. लेकिन वो ये कहते हैं it's okay. I think I drew this for you. Let me draw this anyway again. Let me know if I did this before. But this is sort of like the journey of the Sufi, the Salik. ठीक है, the Salik is the traveler जो सुलूक को तय कर रहा है, सालिक. ठीक है. अच्छा, अब ये फना है और ये वका है. So what they're saying is that you start from cutting off from the world. So in fana, it's 0% of the world, okay, and 100% of the remembrance of God. And then they're saying that maybe it should be this way, clockwise, okay. So okay, that's bad. अच्छा, तो इंसान यानी इस स्टेट पे जा सकता है कि वो अल्लाह ताला को इतना याद कर रहा हो कि वो दुनिया से बिल्कुल अलहदा होके अल्लाह की याद में गुम है, ठीक है. बट they say that then you see he has to come back to baqa because this is the maqam of the prophets. The prophets were not cut off from the world. They were 100% in the world. So this is 100% world. And बाकी उस जिक्र, वो जो जिक्र है वो बाकी रह गया. तो यहाँ पे एक्चुअली जो बात हो रही है फना बका की, वो जिक्र की बात हो रही है. दिस इज व्हाट आई मेंट टू एक्सप्लेन हियर, ठीक है. कि दिस इज 100, they need to come back to baqa, which is a state in which they are 100% involved in the world and 100% remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. So this was 0% world and 100% God, and now baqa is 100% world and 100% God. So this is ideal. तो ये नहीं हो सकता है कि कोई फना में जाके समझे कि नहीं यही आइडियल है, I'm lost in God, but then a good teacher will teach them to come back to baqa, right? And again, the question which I think Hidayatullah asked in the last session, right? He asked if it's really necessary to go into any silsila. Well, that's exactly what I want you guys to think about. वैसे तो मैंने आंसर दे दिया था उस सेशन में, अगर आप लोगों ने सुन लिया रिकॉर्डिंग. But you know, that is something to think about. And the idea is that if you get the right skill set, you're being taught to go to baqa without going into fana. You don't, if basically you're not going through a silsila, this is still ideal in all senses of the word, because हमने जो सारा कुछ पढ़ा है, you know, following the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sunnah is primordiality. तो उसमें क्या था? Emulation of the Prophet, inner and outer. That means that because he remembered Allah, उन्होंने 100 times वो इस्तिग़फ़ार करते थे रसूल करीम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, राइट? तो हम लोग कितनी दफ़ा करते हैं? क्या हम 100 दफ़ा करते हैं इस्तिग़फ़ार in our day, right? So the idea is that following the sunnah, doing it above the Prophet ﷺ, should take us to baqa. So it's only when people are having, you know, a hard time in going towards baqa that they want to look for something, that they're you know, they have this desire and they have the knowledge, but now they want a skill set. So someone might go ahead and say that I need to follow this path, I want to become a salih, right? And maybe that will help me. So for that, a person needs to know the masail, you know, the pitfalls, इसको इंग्लिश में कहते हैं. जो मसाइल है तसव्वुफ की, जो पिटफॉल्स है, यानी कहाँ पे आप गिर सकते हैं. उर्दू में कोई और अच्छा वर्ड अगर इसका किसी को आ रहा हो पिटफॉल्स का, यानी वो इस तरह की मकाम आपके यू नो पाथ में जहाँ कि आप स्लिप हो जाएं, आप गिर जाएं, गलती कर सकते हैं आप, जहाँ पे जब तक आपको उनका पता नहीं होगा तो आप उससे बच नहीं सकते. दैट्स व्हाई इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस कॉन्सेप्ट, even if you're not going on the silsila, but at least having knowledge about it, right? This is a huge part of our tradition, Islamic tradition, and it has always been a part of it. And like I said, it's coming from, you know, the Sahaba Karam. तो उसमें जो कुछ गलत ऐड हुआ है उसको हम निकालेंगे, लेकिन हम 100% तसव्वुफ की कॉन्सेप्ट को नहीं निकाल सकते, because it is part and parcel of deen. All right, so now the next reading, if I'm not wrong, is on the book and sunnah, on following the book and sunnah. फना एंड बका का जो ये थोड़ा सा पार्ट है सिर्फ, राइट? Right at the end he says on page 301 the object of fana and baka yani iska maqsad kya hai fana aur baka ka, which are the essence of wilaya. Essence of wilaya yani Allah का वली होने का मतलब यही होता है जब हम कहते हैं ना फला अल्लाह का वली है, doesn't have to be a famous sheikh or something. It can just be a person in the village, a simple person who remembers Allah. उसकी एक खास अल्लाह ताला के साथ रिलेशनशिप है, ठीक है, तो वो एक 100% being connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is what makes the person a wali, ठीक है, and you never know who can be a wali of Allah. Acha. The object of fana and baka, which are the essence of wilaya, is to acquire this conviction and nothing else. If one understands fana in God and baqa by God in any other sense which suggests the fusion of man into God, it is a blasphemous distortion. So what he is clarifying is fana का मतलब ये नहीं है कि आप union कोई हो जाता है God के साथ. And there are certain, you know, literature, pieces of English literature, Orientalist literature, यानी जो बाहर से लोगों ने इस ट्रेडिशन को देखा होता है, नॉन मुस्लिम्स हैव लुक्ड एट इट इन ओरिएंटलिस्ट फैशन, उसमें वो ऐसी बात कर बैठते हैं कि यूनियन ऑफ गॉड का कॉन्सेप्ट मिलेगा आपको किताबों में, लिटरेचर में, बट लाइक ही सेइंग शेख सरहिंदी ही वांटेड टू रिवाइव द ट्रू अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ द तसव्वुफ, एंड ही इज सेइंग दैट कोई अगर कह रहा है कि ये यूनियन हो जाता है गॉड के साथ तो ये ब्लास्फेमी है, बिकॉज कुल हु अल्लाहु अहद अल्लाहु समद लम यलिद व लम यूलद व लम यकुल लहु कुफुवन अहद, nobody is like him. There's no such thing as union with God in the Islamic tradition, right? That is exactly what the Islamic tradition is famous for. तो अगर कोई experience ऐसा होता है, it's just an experience that a person is feeling, it's because they are fani, fana filla, अरबी में filla कहते हैं, that's why he's translated is it as in God, यानी अल्लाह में गुम हो जाना, lost in God, right? अच्छा, so he is saying that this is not, does not mean union in God. It means being lost in God, ठीक है, lost in the remembrance of Allah. अच्छा, और इनकी पर्पस क्या होता है? इसकी पर्पस यही है, कन्विक्शन, टू एक्वायर यकीन, क्योंकि जब इंसान अल्लाह की याद हासिल कर लेता है, यानी इतनी ज़्यादा उसको आदत हो जाती है अल्लाह को याद रखने की, तो फिर उस मतलब उसमें कोई भी कुछ भी कह देगा, देयर इज़ नो लॉजिकल प्रूफ दैट यू नीड फॉर द एग्जिस्टेंस ऑफ अल्लाह, क्योंकि अल्लाह की याद ही जो है ना, वो जो रियलिटी है, जो कन्विक्शन है, वो आपके दिल में ले आती है. इट्स एग्जैक्टली द रिमेम्बरेंस ऑफ अल्लाह दैट गिव्स यू दैट, ठीक है. So again, there's so many ways to remember Allah. Now I'll tell you just, ये जो skill set है, हम skill set की बात कर रहे थे. So one of the first ways is studying his attributes. अगर आपको attributes ही नहीं पता, अल्लाह ताला के नाम ही नहीं पता, जो कि 99 से भी ज़्यादा हैं, there are some that are apart from the 99 as well, ठीक है. So for example, on the Kaaba, on the kiswa of the Kaaba, the kiswa means the कपड़ा, जो काला कपड़ा जो एक ज़माने में सिर्फ ब्लैक नहीं होता था, ठीक है, उसमें इंस्क्राइब्ड होता है, यानी within with the black thread, it's basically interwoven into that cloth some names of Allah. तो उसमें एक आपको मिलेगा या हन्नान या मन्नान. Now these two words of these two names of Allah are not within the 99 names that are famous, ठीक है. The 99 names are actually found in the Quran, ठीक है. Ya Hanan, Ya Manan, these are two other names that are not from the 99 names. And what does it mean? So let me tell you what Hanan means. Hanan means a being who, जिसको कहते हैं कि आप अगर आपसे कोई नाराज़ हो तो आपसे रहा ना जाए, ठीक है. आप किसी को शायद जानते हो, कभी ऐसा हो सकता है कि कोई फ्रेंड हो, कोई सिबलिंग हो, समवन दैट यू नो, कि अगर आप उससे नाराज़ हो तो वो आपको मनाते हैं. Now, can you imagine this attribute being of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So, I mean, this is something which वही बात है, हम लोग सोचते नहीं है ना, हमने सोचा ही नहीं कभी अल्लाह ताला के बारे में कि अल्लाह ताला है कौन. शुरू से बचपन से हमें बताते जाते हैं कि ये एक बीइंग है जिनसे आपने डरना है बस, and that's all we know about Allah. So he is al-Hannan, which means that the being who wants you to be razi with him, ठीक है. So again, अब वो जो आपने सुनी थी ना साइंस वाली एक वीडियो थी, the Australian convert who was asking Allah for signs, right? There's another one as well. There's another video by, I'm not sure actually if he's a Japanese or a Korean, not really sure, but he tells his story. And again, um, he actually saw the prophet in his dreams twice, but again he was being stubborn and he was saying that no, I need some kind of proof. तो खैर उसमें भी सिमिलर है कि हमें बहुत सारे साइंस मिल रहे होते हैं, एंड देन देयर वेज दैट अल्लाह सुब्हानहू व तआला इज कॉलिंग टुवर्ड्स अस, इट्स जस्ट दैट वी डोंट रियलाइज इट. So in our lives, we need to be aware of such things. It's just honestly, sometimes we don't realize it. Sometimes at the right moment, a good friend comes up. We're having a bad day, and a good friend says something, sends us something, and it's like it picks us up, it uplifts us, right? अब असल बात ये है कि उस फ्रेंड ने तो किया ही है अच्छा काम, उसको सवाब मिला उस काम का, उसने आपका दिल को खुश किया, बट हु इज द एक्चुअल डूअर? यानी हम ये भूल जाते हैं कि एक्चुअली अल्लाह सुब्हानहू व तआला सेंड दैट पर्सन टू अस. अल्लाह सुब्हानहू व तआला पुट इट इन देयर हार्ट to send you that certain thing at that moment. So it's actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, that we should be remembering also at that time. So he is the capital D doer. That's an attribute of his being Al-Hannan. Okay, the Salik part simply means कि Salik means the seeker, ठीक है ना? जो सुलूक पे चल रहा है, एक रास्ता है तसव्वुफ का, ठीक है, जिसमें आप एक टीचर लेते हैं जो शेख होता है, तो आप एक सुलूक तय कर रहे हैं, ठीक है. You are the Salik means you are the seeker, you are following that path. तो उसमें जब आपको जिक्र कोई बताया जाता है, तो this is the circular thing that I've drawn here, the clock type of clockwise journey. This is the suluk. ठीक है, this is what they are actually aiming to go towards fana and then back towards baqa. यानी वो इतना याद करें, यहाँ से शुरू होंगे, ठीक है, यहाँ से पता नहीं कहाँ से शुरू होंगे. You can call this zero, I'm not sure, because if you make it clockwise, you're going to say that they were at 100% world and they were at 0% God. So they weren't remembering Allah at all. They were 100% with the world. So they start their journey, then they reach 0% world and 100% God. यानी वो इतना जिक्र करें कि अल्लाह को याद करें, ठीक है, और कई मर्तबा वर्ल्ड से हटना पड़ता है. That's why you have these retreats, different people, different groups of Muslims do it differently. So you have the Tablighis also that go for Tabligh. That's also sort of, cutting off from the world and going specifically for one thing, right? So उसमें भी आप कह सकते हैं, यानी that is the idea. And interestingly, the Tablighis were actually before that. They're stemming from, Sufi Silsila. So the person who founded the Tablighi Jamaat himself used to follow the Sufi tariqa. And then he found this to be better. So again, वही बात है कि जो purposes थे ना Sufism के, वो उन्होंने इस तरह से उसको translate किया. Right. तो जो सालिक है, यानी जो seeker है, जो traveler है on this path, he's supposed to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he might reach the state of not being at all connected with the world and 100% absorbed in the remembrance of Allah. And this is a very rare thing as well. It's not like everybody goes through it, but the idea is that this could be a path we're following. But most people, maybe they start this path, and maybe they're going towards, 50% of the world, 50% of remembrance of God, and then they're maybe going towards 50% of the world, and then 90% remembrance, and then they may come back to the world, 100% of the world, and maybe 90% remembrance of God. I mean, it's just theoretical, right? But the idea is कि आप वो जिक्र करते हैं तो आप अल्लाह ताला से जुड़ते हैं, ठीक है, अल्लाह की याद से. You become well versed with remembering Allah throughout your day. अच्छा. Now you open up to on following the book and sunnah. तो again इस reading में भी यही बात दोबारा mentioned है कि यानी Sufism is not anything beyond the Quran and the Sunnah. ठीक है, so this book is by Imam al-Haddad. he is going to talk about innovations. And why is that important? Because when we're studying Sufism, a lot of people say it's just an innovation क्योंकि नबी करीम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के ज़माने में ये नहीं था. It wasn't called tasawwuf at least, ठीक है? The science of the heart. So on page 37 of the Book of Assistance, और आपकी पैकेज की पेज नंबर 296 है. ये एक्चुअली आगे पीछे इसलिए है बिकॉज आई थिंक पहले it used to be before and then later I put it after the Sufism and Sharia reading. Okay, I need to do something about these page numbers because they're very annoying sometimes. So there are three kinds of innovations. The first is a good innovation, which is that the well-guided leaders have a find in conformity. अच्छा, अब usually क्या होता है, इनोवेशन को इनोवेशन ही कहा जाता है बिकॉज एक हदीस है जिसमें कहा गया है कि हर इनोवेशन दीन में बिदअत ही है. यानी बिदआ मीन्स इनोवेशन, कोई नई चीज़ ले आना दीन में जो कि पहले नहीं थी प्रॉफेट सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के ज़माने में. तो इस वजह से अगर आप इसको बिल्कुल लिटरली लेते हैं इस हदीस को, then everything is a bid'ah. But interestingly, if you look at the scholars and what they said about this hadith, you go back into the books of the scholars, even Ibn Taymiyyah, who is a scholar of the Salafi tradition, ठीक है, तो वो क्या कहते हैं, इनोवेशन या बिदा को हसना, बिदा हसना को भी मेंशन करते हैं, विच इज़ अ गुड इनोवेशन. एग्जाम्पल इज तरावी की जो नमाज है 20 रकात, दिस वाज नॉट इंट्रोड्यूस्ड बाय द प्रॉफेट सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम. उस वक्त वो डिफरेंट रकात पढ़ा करते थे. एक नंबर जो है वो इकट्ठे पढ़ना, जमात में पढ़ना, ये तब सुन्नत नहीं था. But the Prophet ﷺ did pray, and he did say in hadiths that last 10 days में और ज़्यादा इबादत करनी चाहिए, right? This is proven. It's just that they used to pray in any way. यानी कि ऐसी कोई बात नहीं की थी Prophet ﷺ ने कि वो जो 20 रकात हैं वो इकट्ठे पढ़ने उस ज़माने में होती थी. But it was introduced later by Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, right? And this is known as a good bid'ah because it benefits the Muslim ummah. It makes us do what the Prophet ﷺ did. It actually takes us back to the sunnah. ठीक है, तरावी पढ़ना तो सुन्नत है, लेकिन जिस तरह से 20 तरावियाँ पढ़ना और इकट्ठे पढ़ना, वो जो है वो इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ था हज़रत उमर रज़ियल्लाहु अन्हु के ज़माने में. एंड इट्स known by the scholars as a bid'ah hasana, as a good innovation. Similarly, Hazrat Usman रज़ियल्लाहु अन्हु, उन्होंने वो सारे कुरान इकट्ठे करके और एक को फेमस कर दिया था, ताकि क्योंकि जब इस्लाम फैल रहा था तो there was a fear कि वो उसमें कोई मसला ना हो जाए, that if it's spreading to all these parts of the world, then let's make one copy so that there is no this I will have to Google and study on my own as well. Calendars, are the calendars Sufi? I have no idea. So number one, I need to look at you can do it also. You can Google the 5 silsilas, which are they 5, are they 4? Because I remember there were 4, but now we're, counting 5. And now calendars, I'm not sure, so I'll also search for that, inshallah. Zaki, can you please play with her? She wants to play. Okay, so hasana bidah hasana bhi hai, but then there's also a neutral innovation, and then there's also blameworthy innovation. ठीक है, और इसमें फिर आपको बहुत सारी explanations from different scholars from different times मिल जाएंगी. तो अब आजकल के हिसाब से अगर ये देखें, यानी इसराफ करना आप सब जानते हैं बुरा समझा जाता है. इसराफ करना यानी और ख़ास तौर पर जब आप अपने, वो कहते हैं ना, क्या है मुहावरा उर्दू का, कि चादर देखकर पैर फैलाएं. सो लुक एट व्हाट यू आर गिवन एंड देन ओनली स्पेंड अकॉर्डिंगली. उससे ज़्यादा बढ़कर जब हम खर्च करते हैं, be it marriages, be it, maybe even giving gifts to others. So if you're doing it only, because of the pressure of society, कि लोग क्या कहेंगे, that's not a good thing, because eventually it can lead a person to have financial issues. ठीक है. Okay. So if you look at this, what is he saying? He's saying कि बहुत ज़्यादा, यानी आप yes, let's talk about the brands, right? The lawn brands that we have. So the idea is that what's happening is that there's a monopoly, and these brands are selling things at such an insane price. At the end of the day, it's just lawn, ठीक है? And what happens, अब एक ज़माने में तो बहुत साल चलते होते थे कपड़े, but अब ये होता है कि 2 साल के अंदर they start to sort of shred apart, right? So at the end of the day, it is lawn that you are buying. It's that one piece of cloth. It's not like a special, I don't know, silk or something. It's not a different type of cloth, but they're selling it at an insane price. So it does make you think, right? Um, is it worth spending money over that? So again, इसमें मतलब बहुत सारी चीजें हैं. So a lot of people I know, they will wait for those brands. They will first of all choose those brands that are not insanely high priced, and then they might even go for just the sale time. अब आप इसको कुछ लोग कहेंगे कि शायद ये कंजूसी है. These are things to think about. These are like everyday life decisions that we're making, right? So we should think about them, and it's good if people think about it. इसमें आप देखें कि दीन क्या कह रहा है. There is a large window, ठीक है, to understand, to interpret these things. And even if you study the fatwas of scholars, you're going to be looking at different fatwas, ठीक है? You get different वक्त के हिसाब से, और of course हर इंसान की different situation होती है, तो उस हिसाब से इंसान ने वो decision लेना है, right? So it really depends on what we're, how much we have, and then how much are we giving in sadaqah. If a person is already giving a lot in sadaqah, right? If they're a very generous person, and then they want to buy, once in a while they might want to buy something really expensive, which they can honestly get cheaper as well, but maybe they really like the design and they get it. So that will be looked upon as something different, as opposed to someone who cannot afford something, number one, and number two, it is really like extra spending, right? बिल्कुल इसको फजूल खर्ची कहा जाता है उर्दू में. तो फजूल खर्ची जो है वो नहीं है, राइट? और अल्लाह ताला ने कहा है कि उसमें से खर्च करो जो मैंने तुम्हें दिया है, और खर्च करना इस नियत के साथ कि अल्लाह ताला खुश होते हैं. दैट्स आल्सो गुड थिंग. So like I remember giving you this example कि अपनी फैमिली के ऊपर खर्च करना, that's also sadaqah. ठीक है? So spending on your family, and then when you're spending on yourself, you do it with the niyyah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, he is al-jameel yuhibbul jamal, that he is the beautiful and he loves beauty. So if you're doing it with that intention, and also another ayah in the Quran, remember the blessings, mention the blessings of Allah. Do you guys think this is Surah Duha or Surah Alam Nashrah? Surah Duha ही है. Surah Duha में है أما بنعمة ربك فحدث. And as for the blessings or the ni'mas of your Lord, and the blessings that Allah has given you, فحدث, then mention them or speak of them. तो अल्लाह ने जो दिया है उसका शुक्र अदा करना, उसको याद करना. शुक्र करने से अल्लाह ताला और देते हैं. तो ये जो बात है ना इस आयत में, इस नियत के साथ अगर इंसान करे, तो अगेन इट गोज बैक टू द नियत दैट वी आर मेकिंग. अच्छा, somebody if you are asking what does अल-मन्नान, अच्छा अल-मन्नान का मैंने नहीं किया था. अल-मन्नान का मीनिंग है द गिवर ऑफ ऑल गुड एंड बेनिफिट. ठीक है. अभी जब मैंने बात की ब्लेसिंग्स की, तो ये जो कुछ इंसान के पास अच्छा है, जो कुछ भी अच्छा है, ठीक है, अगर वो बात है कि इंसान क्या वो ढूंढे कि उसके पास क्या चीज़ अच्छी है, कुछ ना कुछ जो भी इंसान के पास अच्छी चीज़ है वो अल्लाह ताला ने दी है. So he is Al-Mannan, who is the giver of all benefits and all good things. Is Bida Hasana allowed? What if the end of the Zan has the words La ilaha illallah? We add the word Muhammad Rasulullah. Acha. So again, a bidat hasana that is accepted by all the scholars. Only that we can accept. Any khud se agar insan bidat kar raha hai na, that's not understood as something acceptable, because वही बात है, फिर तो हम कुछ भी कर लेंगे ना, religion में हम कुछ भी add कर लेंगे, ठीक है. And people who don't have knowledge of the deen, then they can really go astray, ठीक है, and cause other people to go astray. तो उसी तरह even तसव्वुफ में भी ये problem इसीलिए आती है कि लोगों को दीन की समझ सही तरह नहीं होती, and then they add something which they think it's good, and then it gets worse and worse and worse until so many people are following someone and it becomes really crazy, right? तो इसलिए जो बिदा हसना का टर्म यूज़ हुआ है, स्कॉलर्स ने यूज़ किया है, उन्होंने पर्टिकुलर एग्जांपल्स यूज़ किए हैं कि जो सब ने एक्सेप्ट कर लिए थे. तो हज़रत उमर ने जब तरावी 20 रकात की उन्होंने अनाउंस की कि ये पढ़ी जाएगी, सुन्ना मुअक्कदा इसको करार दे दिया, राइट, दैट एवरीबडी शुड कम टू द मस्जिद एंड रीड एंड प्रे दीस 20 तरावी. तो उसमें nobody actually stood up against him, right? Everybody understood that there was some hasan, there's some good coming out of it, because they had seen the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam pray in Ramadan, and they had seen, you know, कि किस जोश से उन्होंने इबादत की रमज़ान में, ख़ास तौर पर, और ख़ास तौर पर आखिरी 10 दिन. तो जब उन्होंने वो देखा था नबी करीम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम का जो अगेन जो इनर डायमेंशन था, इवन दो ही हैड नॉट स्पेसिफाइड, राइट, कि ये जो है वो जमात में पढ़ी जाएगी, आप घर पे भी पढ़ सकते थे, राइट. लेकिन जब उन्होंने देखा कि हमारी उम्मत के लिए फ़ायदेमंद है कि सब लोग मस्जिद आकर ये पढ़ें, तो फिर everybody saw it to be a bidah hasana. So it was basically an ijma. It was a consensus that this is bidah hasana. This might be an innovated idea that इसको आप सुन्ना मुअक्कदा कहें कि आप नमाज मस्जिद में आकर पढ़ें, तरावी जो है वो मस्जिद में आकर पढ़ें, राइट. लेकिन it was accepted
Ma'am,
as a positive. हाँ जी, innovation. जी जी.
ma'am, you call Taraweeh Sunnat Muakkida. So,
जी.
is it called Sunnat? यानी इसकी ताकीद रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने की है, या मतलब एज ए इबादत के तौर पर जिसकी तायद
हाँ,
होती है?
तो
थोड़ा
वो
सा
जो मैं
ताकीद.
बता रही थी कि पर्टिकुलरली 20 रकात का और मस्जिद में पढ़ने का, इन दोनों चीज़ों का नहीं मेंशन होता, ठीक है. लेकिन एट द सेम टाइम ताकीद उन्होंने की थी कि इबादत करनी है रमज़ान में. तो यू कैन फाइंड दीज हदीसेस. चलें, लेट मी, we only have how many, we have a few minutes left, 3-4 minutes, so we can find. Sunnah.com is a good corpus of hadiths, but again you need to know what you are looking for, otherwise it's hard to find any hadith in it. But it has a good collection of the sahih, of the Sihah Sitta at least. Okay, so ये a lot of times होता क्या है कि तरावी ही वो चीज़ है एक्स्ट्रा जो हम पढ़ते हैं रमज़ान में. उसके अलावा मुश्किल होता है कि कोई भी इंसान कोई चीज़ पढ़े, राइट. अगेन कोई बात है कि तहज्जुद, क्योंकि हम उस वक्त ऑलरेडी उठे होते हैं इफ्तार के लिए, राइट, सॉरी सहूर के लिए, सहरी जिसको हम कहते हैं, सहरी के लिए. तो that's still easier, right, in Ramadan. But if you, okay, so the hadith that we have, let me show this to you. hadith that we have of the last 10 days. With the start of the last 10 days of Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ used to tighten his waist belt. ये again एक मुहावरा है, Arabic मुहावरा, ठीक है? ये उर्दू में भी आता है. I'm not sure exactly how it's phrased, लेकिन
कमर कसना में
إذا دخل العشر شد مئزره. Shadda مئزره means कि he used to tighten his waist belt, meaning that he used to work hard. यानी जब एक काम के लिए इंसान ready होने लगे, ठीक है? So sometimes you know like ये एक expression आता है ना कि जब आप like you're getting ready to do something, you pull up your sleeves. I think that's an English way to express it. But khair, so tighten his waistband and used to pray all the night, and he used to keep his family awake for the prayers. ठीक है? वो अहया लैलहू, और वो अपनी रात को जिंदा कर देते. अहया लैलहू व ऐक़ज़ अहलहू, and he used to wake up his family for it. ठीक है? So वही बात है that this is something. Okay, so is it important to pray 20 rakats of Taraweeh? अच्छा, दो बातें मैं इसकी बताऊंगी. देखें, एक question यानी एक answer इसका ये है that so it's known as the Sunnah Muakkada. ठीक है? In the Sunni scholarship, it's always seen as a Sunnah Muakkada. They could be short rakats. If you're praying at home, they could be short rakats. ठीक है? But again, yani this is the first answer is that yes, it is Sunnah Muakkada. Unless you are not feeling well, then you should do your best to pray these 20 rakats. ठीक है? Second is that my understanding is कि वही बात है कि जब ये हज़रत उमर रज़ियल्लाहु अन्हु ने इसको ज़रूरी करार दिया था 20 रकात को, तो उसकी रीजनिंग क्या थी? उसकी रीजनिंग जो थी, और अभी भी हमें ये नज़र आ रहा है, ठीक है, that a lot of times even within Ramadan what happens is that like in those 30 days, in the beginning you have a lot of attendance, and then in the middle sort of lukewarm ho jati hai, you know, we get tired, we need a break, and then at the end in the last 10 days again aap dekhte hain ki wo zyada dobara log padhne lag jate hain. So let's say that this was not made you know sunnah muakkada. Let's suppose 20 rakats were not made sunnah muakkada and accepted by scholars as being such. तो उसमें क्या होना था? यानी उसमें यही था ना कि that yes, you should pray tahajjud. Now tahajjud is actually important throughout the year. यानी किसी दिन भी आप throughout the year जब आप tahajjud पढ़ते हैं, तो उसके बारे में क्या है? हदीस कुदसी that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes down to the lowest heavens and he asks who wants to be forgiven so that he may be forgiven. तो वो एक special time of the night है. But how many of us pray tahajjud? तो similarly Ramadan में भी अगर ये चीज़ ना होती कि हम आराम से यानी इकट्ठे जाकर एक चीज़ ऑलरेडी हो रही है मस्जिद में, यू स्टैंड बिहाइंड द इमाम एंड यू प्रे दोस 20 रकात, अगर ये भी ना होता तो हमारा और क्या हाल होता, मतलब कितना और बुरा हाल होता, राइट? आई मीन because tahajjud is on ourselves, right? We can pray tahajjud at night, और उस वक्त हम पढ़े ना पढ़े, there is nothing that is sort of forcing us to pray those rakats, right? So Baharal, yes, it is a sunnah muakkada, and this is exactly a good example of bid'at hasana. And you can call it a bid'at hasana because it is an innovation as far as the praying in the congregation goes. वैसे अगर आप तरावी की हदीस, चले वो भी मैं आपको बोल देती हूँ. दूसरे बटन. So if you look at Makkah and Medina as well, there are 20 rakats that are prayed, right? There are other smaller masajid that pray 8 rakats. That is because there is a hadith that mentions 8, and the scholarly opinion on that is that it's mentioning tahajjud namaz. The tahajjud salah used to be 8 rakas. So again, that's like an intellectual debate, all right? Um, so there is a narration in the Muwatta of Imam Malik. Remember this came up when we were doing hadith studies. This was a hadith book written by Imam Malik. So in his Muwatta, it said in the time of Umar radhiyallahu anhu, the people used to offer 20 rakas. So that's what they use. Bahral, this is something that is, debated, and then most of us in Pakistan, most of the masajid, they pray 20 rakas. और मक्का और मदीना में भी 20 ही होती हैं. So okay, so the class is ended now. If there's any other question regarding whatever we covered today, तो ask please. Otherwise फिर हम कल बाकी continue करेंगे इंशाल्लाह.
Ma'am, I have a question, please.
जी.
Ma'am, we talk about being moderate in Islam. मतलब इस्लाम हमें सिखाता है कि हर चीज में म्याना रवैया इत्तदाल होना चाहिए.
Yes.
The two extremes are not the good things. ठीक है. When we talk about the Sufis and Walis, they just don't care about this world. They are being completely cut off from this world. They just prepare for the life after this world. तो they just have to be in seclusion and meditation, और उनको social होने में कोई interest नहीं होता. So isn't it a contradicting thing कि इस्लाम हमें कहता है कि आपको दुनिया की भी परवाह करनी है और अपनी आखिरत भी संवारनी है, लेकिन ये जो सूफीज हैं ये जैसे आप सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम देखें नमाज पढ़ने जाते थे तो सहाबा के साथ गुफ्तगू किया करते थे, इसके अलावा अपने घर भी मेहमान बुलाया करते थे और उनके घर भी मेहमान बन के जाया करते थे. लेकिन आजकल जो हमारे सूफीज और वलीज का कॉन्सेप्ट है दैट इज एंटायरली डिफरेंट. हमारे यहाँ है कि वो कंप्लीटली सॉलिट्यूड तन्हाई पसंद होते हैं जो मेडिटेट करते रहते हैं 24 आवर्स के लिए. तो अब ये सूफीज का कॉन्सेप्ट ठीक है हमारे यहाँ या नहीं ठीक?
ओके, तो ये अच्छा सवाल है और ये वही बात है जो मैं चाह रही थी कि आप लोग खुद इस पे सोचें, राइट? दैट डज अ पर्सन रियली हैव टू टेक द पाथ एज सच, या ये कि हम ऑलरेडी यानी हमारे पास सुन्नत है, हम उसी सुन्नत को हम बस सिंपली फॉलो कर लें. ठीक है, तो दिस इज अगेन समथिंग आई वांट ईच ऑफ यू टू थिंक अबाउट. ठीक है, सो यस, द परफेक्शन वुड बी, जो मैंने आपको दिखाया था अभी वाइट बोर्ड पे, कि जो बका वाला पार्ट था, ठीक है, राइट हियर एट द बॉटम, दिस हियर, यहाँ दिस इज आवर एक्चुअल गोल जो है हमारा वो यही है. ठीक है, दिस इज लाइक यू सेइंग दिस वाज द सुन्नह ऑफ द प्रॉफेट सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, ही वाज नॉट कट ऑफ फ्रॉम सोसाइटी. तो ये गोल है, लेकिन बात ये होती है कि कई मर्तबा एक इंसान चाह रहा है कि ये करे, लेकिन वो ये फील कर रहा है कि मैं दुनिया में तो बहुत ज़्यादा इन्वॉल्व हूँ, लेकिन मुझे अल्लाह ताला की याद नहीं मुयसर हो रही, और मैं जितनी भी कोशिश कर लूँ 10% तक फिर भी हो जाती है, बट जितना मैं चाह रहा हूँ उतनी नहीं हो रही. तो वो ऐसा इंसान हो सकता है कि उसको यानी इस एक मिनट हो गए कि यहाँ पे ना ये चादर खोल के बिछा दो, इस ये वाली जो पड़ी हुई थी ना जी. ये भी उठा लें प्लीज. अच्छा सॉरी. सो राइट, दिस इज एक्चुअली द गोल. ठीक है, कि 100% अल्लाह सुब्हानहू तआला की याद हो, दिस इज व्हाट द प्रॉफेट सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम टॉट. हाँ जी, और 100% उधर तक ही कर लें, बस ये साइड में. तो अगर कोई इंसान ऐसे ही मतलब जो स्किल सेट उसके पास है ऑलरेडी, उसको करके 100% इन द वर्ल्ड एंड 100% रिमेम्बरेंस ऑफ अल्लाह ताला कर सके, तो वो वाकई ये कहेंगे कि वी डोंट नीड दिस सलूक. ठीक है, इट्स ओनली फॉर पीपल हु आर अनएबल टू अचीव दिस 100% रिमेम्बरेंस ऑफ गॉड that they go through this and then they come back to the world again in perfect आप कह लें बैलेंस, जो आप बैलेंस चाह रहे थे ना, मतलब जो मिडिल वे है इस्लाम का, उस बैलेंस तक पहुंचने के लिए उनको इस पाथ को लेना पड़ता है, ठीक है। एंड इट डज सॉर्ट ऑफ मेक सेंस। अगर आप बहुत ज़्यादा दुनिया में मुब्तला हो गए, यानी आपकी आदत बन गई है, हर चीज़ आप दुनिया के हिसाब से कर रहे हैं, आपने देखना है कि सोसाइटी क्या चाह रही है आपसे, कि लोग क्या कहेंगे, तो फिर आपके लिए अल्लाह ताला को याद करना बहुत मुश्किल होता है, क्योंकि आपकी आदत है बचपन से कि आप हर चीज़ सोसाइटी के हिसाब से कर रहे हैं। Agar if you're lucky enough and your family and your parents and elders, people around you are people who are always remembering Allah Ta'ala, then it becomes easier for you, honestly. But because not everybody is born in that situation, and like we said कि अल्लाह ताला ने अगर हमें मुसलमान एक घराने में पैदा किया भी है, तो हमारा at in the late teenage or early 20s हमें ये सोच तो आती है that how much of it do we believe in, यानी we sort of have to renew our faith, right? ये नहीं हो सकता कि हम, and it is, yes, a big blessing, it's a gift, but at the end of it we have to make use of it. अगर हम सिर्फ उसको गिफ्ट समझ के हम कहें कि बस we're born Muslim and we don't work on it, then we're not a good enough Muslim. That's why a lot of times when we hear the stories of the converts, तो हमें फील होता है कि हमारा ईमान इतना स्ट्रांग नहीं है, हमने इतना काम नहीं किया, हमने अपनी तजवीद पे काम नहीं किया, तिलावत पे काम नहीं किया। तो ये सारा काम करना होता है हमने, despite it being a big blessing that we're born into a Muslim household, right? तो बहरहाल यानी सम थिंग्स आर गिवन टू अस, वही बात है तकदीर में, सम थिंग्स वी हैव टू वर्क ऑन। और हर इंसान को मुख्तलिफ चीज़ें दी गई होती हैं, एवरीथिंग इज़ रिस्क। किसी को वैसे अच्छी आसानी दी गई है, किसी को हेल्थ टेस्ट की जाती है, तो वो हेल्थ टेस्ट में दे बिकम बेटर बीइंग्स। आई मीन एक अच्छा बेहतर इंसान बनना भी कई मरतबा मुश्किल वक्त के बाद ही होता है। तो बहरहाल तो ब्लेसिंग्स को, मतलब वही बात है कि समटाइम्स पीपल से दैट दीन जो है वो शुक्र और सब्र के दरमियान है। In good times, a person is doing shukr and remembering that it's all from Allah, and in hard times, you're doing sabr. तो ये क्वेश्चन बहुत अच्छा है, हर कोई इसके बारे में सोचे, आपके डिफरेंट आंसर्स हो सकते हैं इसके, you can have your own opinion on it as well, कि क्या there might be some of you more inclined to be interested in such a path. There might be a lot of you who think that you can directly go towards this 100% world and 100% God. So if anybody else wants to add something to this, you are most welcome before you go off. कि आपका क्या ख्याल है या anybody wants to maybe share something या अपनी about this particular thing, कि अगर इंसान यानी अल्लाह ताला की याद उसके लिए आसान है, right? In namaz, that's when we're supposed to remember Allah Ta'ala specifically, and even outside of namaz in your everyday. अच्छा, you're saying it should be 30-70, 30 watt and 70 watt. और ये भी बताएं कि आपने कहाँ से ये
जैसे अब वो जो शेर है
जी
मैम, जैसे वो उर्दू में एक शेर है कि यही इबादत यही दीनो ईमान के काम आए दुनिया में इंसान के इंसान। तो मुझे लगता है, आई पर्सनली डू बिलीव के 50-50 होना चाहिए, बिकॉज सोसाइटी भी जरूरी है आपको। मतलब ये नहीं कि आपकी नीयत ये नहीं होनी चाहिए सोसाइटी की, आपकी नीयत होनी चाहिए कि आपको एक सोसाइटी को एक ग्रूम करना है। आपने आपने मतलब आखिरत की भी तैयारी करनी है, साथ साथ दुनिया में गुम नहीं होना, लेकिन दुनिया को भी साथ साथ लेकर चलना है।
बिल्कुल
तो
ठीक है,
50-50 आई गेस।
ओके ठीक है, जज़ाकल्लाह। और यहाँ शायद में लिखा है इट शुड बी 30-70, तो प्लीज़ क्लैरिफाई 30-70 क्या है, 30 दुनिया 70 दीन, या किस तरह आपने किया डिवाइड, और इसको एक्सप्लेन भी कर दें थोड़ा सा। एंड okay, so you're saying I don't think anyone can be 100% in dunya if he is not 100% in deen. First, counting in this case is making sense. किस तरह? ये आपकी बात ही समझ आई, you can explain. अच्छा, not making sense. अच्छा, तो आप थोड़ा सा और भी एक्सप्लेन कर लें इसको, अगर आपको लग रहा है कि नहीं, if it's not making sense, तो
मैम
प्लीज।
What I think is, if we do everything just for the sake of happiness of Allah Almighty, or if we are helping somebody, if we are doing something, our own work, just for the sake of happiness of Allah, then we
जी
can consider it as 100% toward God, not toward the world.
बिल्कुल सही। यानी वही बात जो हमने पहले की थी कि जो भी आप दुनिया में कर रहे हैं, ठीक है, एवरीथिंग, इवन योर मंडेन एक्शंस इन द वर्ल्ड, ठीक है, या आप किसी को मिल रहे हैं सोसाइटी में, तो यू एक्चुअली, इफ यू डूइंग इट ऑल फॉर अल्लाह सुब्हानहू व तआला, इट एक्चुअली बिकम्स दीन, it actually becomes deen. But then that's what I also like what Sayyid Ashar is saying, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. You were saying that I don't think anybody can be 100% in the world if they're not 100% in deen. I understand half of it, I think. I have half of what you said, but yes, that's my understanding. कि अगर आपने दीन ही सही तरह नहीं समझा, like you don't know what is doing something solely for the sake of Allah, any sincerity towards Allah, या sincerely doing anything for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, अगर आपने experience नहीं किया हुआ, ठीक है, आपको इसकी समझ नहीं है, आपने experience नहीं किया हुआ, तो how is it that anything that you do in the world, how are you going to bring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into it? It's quite an effort that you have to make, and a lot of times we don't even realize, यानी हमारी hidden, कोई बात है ना कि इंसान ने जब अपने आप को पहचाना तो खुदा को पहचाना, हमारे अंदर कई दफ़ा hidden motives होते हैं, ठीक है, a lot of times, यानी we don't even know why we're doing something, and if you sit and think about it, you might be doing it for your own benefit, like it makes you feel good. That's not per se, it's not bad, right? यानी let's suppose हमारे हर किसी की पर्सनालिटी फ़र्क है, तो किसी को कोई चीज़ अच्छी लगती है, so for example they like to do zikr more, यानी उनके अंदर ये चीज़ है, उनको तिलावत का शौक़ है, उनको जिक्र का शौक़ है, तो ये कर रहे हैं, ठीक है, because it's sort of easy for them, or it comes easier and more naturally to them, right? कोई और है जो किसी और की हेल्प करना उनको ज़्यादा आसान लगता है, तो इट्स गुड दैट यू आर वर्किंग ऑन योर स्ट्रेंथ्स, यानी जो आपके लिए आसान है आप वही उसी पर अमल कर रहे हैं, वही कर रहे हैं, तो दैट्स गुड एंड यू शुड व्यू इट एज अ गिफ्ट ऑफ अल्लाह सुब्हानहू व तआला। लेकिन अगर आप बहुत डीप जाएँ तो आप ये देखेंगे कि अच्छा फिर if you are a person who's helping others, so ये शेयर जिस तरह बिल्कुल बजा था, yes, you should be here to bring benefit to others, to all of creation, whether any other humans as well and animals and everyone else, क्योंकि वरना तो आप फसाद होंगे ना, मतलब यानी either person causes others harm or they cause others benefit. They can be neutral, but a lot of times it's like one or the other. तो इंसान ने दूसरों को फ़ायदा पहुंचाना है, ठीक है, or at least अपने harm से रोकना है. That's why this hadith, when you go out, एक hadith है, Allah Ta'ala save me from the misguidance of others and save me from being misguided. Allah Ta'ala save me from the zulm of others and save me from doing zulm on others. اللهم إني أعوذ بك أن أضل أو أضل. Zakaria? Okay, so if a person finds, for example, like you're saying, zikr easy, कि वो अकेले एक कमरे में बंद होके सिर्फ जिक्र कर रहे हैं और वो बाहर जाके नहीं मिल रहे, तो yes, they should force themselves to also do other good deeds, not just that one. But it's sort of natural if they're doing it more, at least shuru mein na, so they have to work on themselves, on themselves to do more for others, and for the person who finds it easier to do things for others, they have to work in other manners. यानी वो अपने आप को अगर एक ऑल राउंडर बनाना चाहें तो वो देखेंगे कि दूसरे एक्शंस उनके लिए मुश्किल है. सो व्हाई एम आई गिविंग दिस एग्जांपल, जिस तरह आयतुल बिर है, ठीक है, आयतुल बिर में एंड में जो बात आती थी पेशेंस की आ रही थी, ठीक है, बीच में आती है दैट यू हेल्प अदर्स, राइट, दैट यू हेल्प अदर्स, स्पेशली दोज हु आर क्लोज टू यू, ब्लड रिलेशन, जो आपके रिलेटिव्स हैं, उसमें स्पेशली अगर कोई नीडी है उनकी मदद करना. And then at the end, Allah Ta'ala mentions patience in times of adversity. So these are two different things. यानी हो सकता है कोई इंसान किसी की मदद बहुत करता हो, they're more generous in nature, but they might not find themselves to be patient. So that ayah is also saying that you should be patient. So then अगर एक इंसान चाह रहा है कि वो हर काम, हर यानी एस्पेक्ट ऑफ दीन पे काम करे, तो वो चाहेगा कि मुझे मेरे अंदर ये पेशेंस भी आए. So they want to work on that as well. So a person might actually start following silsila, or start following maybe the teachings at least of the Tasawwuf, They might not actually go into a group, but they might maybe Google and find out ways that they can make themselves more patient. Okay, they might feel कि अच्छा अब adulting is a whole different process. You guys are adults now, and you have adulted in a particular aspect of your life, but then later on, 10 years from now, you will find that you have to adult in a lot of other ways. कई चीज़ें आपने अभी नहीं की होंगी जो आपको अगले 10 साल में नई सीखनी पड़ेंगी, करनी पड़ेंगी, right? So that sort of makes a person grow. तो उसी तरह दीन में बहुत सारे aspects हैं, and that's why that hadith is beautiful. कि Iman is 70 branches, and the more branches there are, the more your Iman is beautiful, the more your deen flourishes. So just like that, you're right. ये अच्छा सवाल है कि अगर कोई सूफी जो है वो एक कमरे में बैठ के सिर्फ जिक्र ही कर रहा है और कुछ नहीं कर रहा, so then is that correct or not, right? फिर भी आप ये भी आर्ग्यू कर सकते हैं कि अगर आपके अंदर एक स्ट्रेंथ है तो why not work more on that instead of doing everything like putting your hand and feet in every other thing. So this is something I want you guys to think about. इसकी अपनी आप ओपिनियन एक बनाएं, क्योंकि it might be possible that some of you might think कि नहीं अगर एक चीज़ मुझे आसान लग रही है तो मैं उस पर क्यों ना ज़्यादा वक्त लगाऊं. That's still a good deed, right? Why not put more effort into that? Okay, for those of you who have another class, for sure you can leave, and we're just ending class. It's just anybody else who has a question can ask. Okay, Hidayatullah.
Ma'am, I have a question about final.
जी.
Final exam, will it be online or physical?
Sorry, क्या?
Will the final be online or physical exam?
जो फाइनल एग्जाम है वो अभी हमें नहीं पता, बिकॉज जो हमारी जो हेड है या हमारे सोशल साइंसेज डिपार्टमेंट है अभी इसमें डिस्कशन चल रही है. सो इट माइट बी फिजिकल. आई थिंक वो शायद सबको चाहें कि फिजिकल हो, बट बिकॉज कोविड हैज इंक्रीज सो मच इसलिए ये अभी क्लियर नहीं है. दैट्स व्हाई आई डिडंट इवन आंसर लास्ट टाइम, बिकॉज आई रियली डोंट नो, एंड वी माइट नो इन अ फ्यू डेज इंशाल्लाह. तो probably in a week's time इसको हम पक्का कर लेंगे इंशाल्लाह, and then you'll know by next week इंशाल्लाह. So if there are no more questions, I'm going to call it a day. जी.
मैम
जी.
लाइक आपने बात की कि मतलब दो ऑप्शंस हो सकते हैं कि बंदे को मतलब एक कमरे में लाइक अकेले में होकर ये करना चाहिए, लेकिन
जी.
मेरा ये वो है क्या कहते हैं परसेप्शन या जो भी है वो ये कि अल्लाह ने मतलब इंसान को पैदा किया अपने दीन को गालिब करने के लिए, लाइक पूरी दुनिया में अपने मतलब अल्लाह के दीन को फैलाने के लिए,
ठीक है.
नॉट इसलिए कि भाई अपने एक रूम में बैठ जाओ जिक्र करो ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह पढ़ो ये पढ़ो. वो तो बंदा अकेले में अपनी मतलब अपनी जिंदगी के बारे में सोच सकता है, लेकिन हम सिर्फ अपनी जिंदगी के लिए थोड़ी आए, हम मतलब ये कि अल्लाह के दिन को गालिब करने के लिए आए ना. अल्लाह का दिन गालिब होकर रहेगा तो हमारा मकसद पूरा होकर रहेगा.
लेकिन
और
मुझे
अगर
ये
हम
बताएं,
मतलब अकेले
आपको याद है सुन्ना इज प्राइमोर्डियलिटी. सो अगेन आई वांट यू गाइस टू थिंक ऑन इट. इसलिए मैं आपको दूसरा पर्सपेक्टिव भी हमेशा दे रही हूँ. पर्टिकुलरली इस टॉपिक में ना आप सारे पर्सपेक्टिव का सोचें, ठीक है. सो सुन्ना इज प्राइमोर्डियलिटी में ये जिक्र था कि नबी करीम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के जो सहाबा कराम थे उनसे लोगों ने दीन कैसे पिकअप किया. हाउ डिड दे वांट, दे लुक्ड एट देम एंड दे सेड कि मैंने आपके जैसा बनना है. तो ये कैसे उनकी पर्सनालिटी के अंदर क्या चीज़ थी जिसकी वजह से लोग उनसे इंस्पायर होते थे और लोग दीन की तरफ उनकी रग़बत पैदा होती थी उनके अंदर. यानी बेसिकली उनका सोल या उनका दिल ही था, ठीक है, जो उन लोगों को अट्रैक्ट करता था. तो ये जो पॉइंट है ना कि जिक्र करना एक कमरे में बैठ के, अगर तो वो इंसान सारी ज़िंदगी यही कर रहा है और कुछ और कर ही नहीं रहा, तो फिर डेफिनेटली इवन आई विल से दैट्स नॉट ओके, राइट. लेकिन अगर वो कह रहे हैं कि दिस इज़ फॉर सम टाइम, आई नीड टू डू दिस फॉर सम टाइम, ताकि मैं अल्लाह ताला की याद में इतना यानी माहिर हो जाऊं, इतनी मुझे प्रैक्टिस हो जाए कि जब मैं वापस जाके दुनिया वाले काम करूं तो मैं गाफिल ना हूँ अल्लाह ताला की याद से. तो फिर आप क्या करेंगे, राइट. सो लेट्स सपोज इट्स लाइक नॉट परमानेंट बट इट्स टेम्पररी. तो फिर आप क्या करेंगे. सो दिस टू थिंक अबाउट दैट. Okay, so Kesser is saying, okay, there's some things I've missed. I believe that it is 100% deen, then that automatically includes deen. And I think it's pointless to separate Allah or deen and dunya. It's sin for Allah, rather he prayed or worked at home or anything, he did it for Allah, so it's any deen. ठीक है. Okay, so I think we're calling it a day. कोई और question तो नहीं है. Do think about it and इंशाल्लाह कल फिर हम इसी को continue करेंगे. and make up your own opinion about this. Okay?
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Allah Hafiz, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Allah Hafiz. Walaikum
Allah
assalam.
Hafiz, ma'am.